Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. Today's class is going to be on a character analysis of Richard Rahl from the Sword of Truth books by Terry Goodkind. Now let's go ahead and just jump right into the class. So, a little bit of background information on these books. There are about 15 of them, if I remember correctly, and most of them center around Richard, Kaylin, and Zed as the three main characters. Richard is really our main character, but Kaylin and Zed are both, they're not really, I wouldn't consider them as like the main characters, but they are very prominent characters. At times it seems like all three of them could be main characters. Kind of like how in Harry Potter, Harry is the main character, but Ron and Hermione are always in the books, and it's not really available to be separated from those characters. Or like in our Dragonlance story, where it's almost like there's not really one main character, even though Tanis or Lorana is the one that is the most common to be the point of view from. So Richard I would classify as the main character, but Kaylin and Zed are characters that are so tightly linked to our main character that they are also important. And each book is its own adventure, and usually in these adventures they're either saving the world, saving the people that live in this world, or saving themselves from some kind of threat. And each book is its own thing. So even though we have, each book is continuous in the timeline, each book is its own plot. So you'll start one and you'll finish that story all the way through, and it will be the end of that main conflict, and then the next book will be a different conflict, versus Dragonlance or Harry Potter, where you go through each book and it's all heading toward the same goal, the same end goal, and just continuing life through those things. Harry Potter, I guess, is kind of a mix from the fact that each book is a different main plot, but then the end goal is to defeat Voldemort. So I guess Dragonlance would be a little bit better of a opposite comparison in the fact that, the Dragon Chronicles of the Lance, you've got all three books that are all leading through a big storyline, one big plot that then ends after book 3. Okay, so if you guys haven't read these books and you guys decided to read them, they are quite an undertaking. They are huge mammoth books. Some of them are 800. I think 700 to 800 is like the least amount of pages one is, and some of them are up to 1,000. I think the first one is like 900 or 1,000 pages, and it's got tiny little print, so it is a very thick, massive book, but they're really good, so I do recommend reading them. But if you're like me, you can't do it like all in one go. You've got to read one, take a little break, read another one, take a little break, which is probably why I've only read up to I believe I'm on book 7, because it does take me some time to be able to get up the motivation and the energy to be able to stick onto that one book, because it is in depth, and despite it being so good, at the end, like the last third, they do seem to be like, are we done yet? I've been reading forever. So I do recommend you check them out though. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into our traits of our main character here, Richard. So a lot of these traits that I'm going to list off, I've got quite a huge chunk of them. They're all very similar to being the fact that he is a very likable, lovable character. He is calm. He is smart or resourceful. He is very friendly and generous. He's kind. He's humble. He's very mature as a person. He's very calculating and thoughtful in the fact that, not calculating in the fact of like him being, sometimes calculating has the connotation of something nefarious they're doing. They're like, you're really calculating, trying to be, mislead somebody or get something out of somebody, but I don't mean calculating in that way. I mean calculating in the fact that he's very thoughtful, very much 5 steps ahead, very much somebody who likes to think things over before he jumps into stuff. So he's not very, in my opinion, he's not very, impulsive and just goes out and does things. He really likes to think about the consequences of his actions. Obviously, that's not always the case in the fact that life is life and someone's just gotta go with things. But in general, he tries to really think through what he's gonna do to make sure it's gonna be the best action plan possible. He's very loving. He's a very direct person in the fact that he won't play games with you. He won't try and manipulate you. He won't try to be someone who he's not. He's just very direct, honest, open, and is like, here's how it is, and I expect you to tell me how it is in return. He's a very strong ruler. As you go through the books, you find that he is going to be the ruler of Dahara, and as people love him, there are several times in the books when he interacts with people and they just love interacting with him. They think he's a really great ruler, somebody that they respect and look up to and know they're going to be taken care of. And last but not least, he's a very, very patient person. Very patient. Someone who will, stick with you even if you get really frustrating. Somebody who really doesn't get angry very easily about things that don't go his way. He's very patient, bides his time, and is willing to wait for any openings that he has for things that he wants when things aren't going his way. And as you read different situations that he's in, you find that he has the patience of a saint. And you're just like, I could not be that way. I could not be as patient as Richard Rahl. So, as I mentioned before, he's a very kind, lovable character, which is, in general, what you want from a main character. That's not always the case in the fact that many people love villains as their good villains because, you just love to hate them. And sometimes you do come from the point of view of the villain and the person who would technically not be the person that you would care to follow. And it gives a different perspective and a different feel. Kind of like, for people who love TV shows, Breaking Bad is a really good example, one that just comes straight to my mind, of where you get to see the perspective of somebody who's not really a good person and would normally be considered a villain in a lot of stories, but you get it from their perspective and you come to care about them and their situation. But Richard is not that way. Richard is really just a kind, good person who wants to do good by the people that he interacts with and wants to help save people when he can. So, if I missed any traits that you think are really important to talk about for Richard, please let me know down below. I would love to have a conversation about it and to be reminded of some of the good, important things that Richard Rahl is. So, yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and jump now into his role in the story. Which you're probably thinking, duh, he's the main character, what is there to talk about his role? But even the main character is the main character for a reason, and they have a very particular role, very particular reason why their character traits are what they are for whatever purpose they have in the story. So I think Richard fills really two types of roles in the story. The first one is kind of obvious since he is the main character, and that's our hero. Even though that it is third person, you can definitely tell that, and it is first third person and it jumps between different characters, so sometimes you're from Kaylin's point of view, Zed's point of view, that kind of thing. But you can really tell that Richard is meant to be who the story is about. It's supposed to be the main character, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Sometimes I'm like, Amy, you need better words to describe these things, better phrases, better ways of describing things. But I guess that's just real life. You can't always make words work. It's just feelings. Does anybody else understand that? Get feelings from books that they just can't articulate very well? Because if so, then me and you, we know each other very well in this situation. But anyway, going back to the fact that Richard is the hero. He is the one that helps the weak people out. Like I said just a minute ago, he's the good guy. So as our hero, he helps people, he wants people to have a good life. He is all about protecting people versus doing the easiest solution. So at the times when the bad guys are like, oh hey, like if you just kill this person, I'll let you off the hook and everything will be good. And he would be the one that would say, no, we're not killing anybody, we're gonna find another way to defeat this evil person. So he's always the advocate for the small people, he's the advocate for the underdog, he's the advocate of anyone and everything, and puts his own safety underneath those that are beneath and those that he feels like are in his charge, which is anybody and everybody he comes across to is in danger. So he basically puts himself on the lowest low of the totem pole so that he can protect others, which is what makes him such a good hero in these stories and such a good main character for us to follow and find out what happens in these stories when he protects these people or is trying to save the world so that people won't be dying for no reason. But then there's also the second role in the story, which is the sage role. Now, the sage role is somebody who searches for the truth, which, if any of you know, the books basically is like the perfect thing for him. He is considered the seeker of truth, which is somebody who isn't supposed to take anything at face value and is always supposed to find out actually what the truth is before you take any actions. So he is somebody who literally, his title in the books is Seeker of Truth, and a sage is a truth seeker. So of course he's also going to be our sage character. He often waits to find out all the information before he acts or before he does anything, because he is somebody who cares about the truth and cares about how things really are over just what is easiest or just what would make other people happy. He really cares about knowing what the truth is and acting upon that truth. And those kind of things are what dictates his actions. This also comes back around to why it's important that he's very patient. It's important why he's very calculating and smart and somebody who is going to take the time to learn what the truth is and not just jump head first into something that he doesn't understand. And this really, when you read the books, really shows that he's the perfect person to be the hero in these stories, because a lot of times the truth is what's most important to help solving the problems that they have. So those are the two main roles that I really see him playing in the books. Now the next thing is, what does he bring to the story? And you're probably like, he's the main character. Why do we have to talk about what he's bringing to the story? But actually, being the main character is the most prime role or prime thing that you can do in a story, and the fact that if you don't have any characters, or in most cases it's one main character, things to happen to, there is no story to be told. So he allows the story to exist. It wouldn't be the same without him. Sure, like we talked about, Kaylin and Zed are very, very top, almost main characters as well. And if you pulled him out of the story, there would still be those two characters have things happening to them. But it would not be the same story at all if we focused on Kaylin and Zed without Richard. So, in the end, Richard is the whole reason that the story can exist in the first place. Because without him, for these trials to be happening to, and for him to be the kind of character that is needed for whatever conflict happens to be able to be resolved in whatever way it is resolved, whether good or bad, he's the kind of character that makes it so it can be resolved and can be happened to and have this ending and this outcome. So Richard is the reason that the whole story can exist and can happen and we can read it. Because without Richard, the story would not be the story that it is. Now, you could be like, well, isn't that the same for every character? But that's not really always the case. Some characters that are just side characters or characters that have very small parts in them, sure, they're put in there for a particular reason, and the story might be different if they were taken out, but the main character is the most prominent character that changes everything about a text if they're not the ones that things are happening to. Just imagine how different the story would be for Harry Potter, let's say, if Hermione or Ron were the main characters, or if Harry just didn't exist at all. Think about how different Dragonlance that we've been reading would be different if there was no Tanis or no Lorana. Think about how different any of your favorite novels would be if you took the main character or one of the main characters, if there are multiple, and just replaced them with somebody else, or made it so another character was the main character and they were not in the story at all. So really, the whole reason that these books can exist the way they do is because of Richard. And that's what he brings to this story, is the ability to exist, and for them to exist the way they do. Now, his goals in the books. Richard's goals usually revolve and change based on the book and what is happening in each book, because each book is its own plot. Each book will change his goals and the fact that he is trying to solve whatever the problem is in each book. So his is kind of something that goals that kind of evolve and change based on what's happening in each book. And there's not a way for me to just pinpoint completely one goal in that sense. But his overall goal in all of the books is just to have a peaceful life with Kaylin. Because Kaylin he loves so much, and they eventually get married. And so the only goal I think that he truly has throughout all of the overarching books is to get to a peaceful life that he can spend with Kaylin and his grandfather Zed. I think that's like, that transcends all the books, and that is one goal I can say that he does carry throughout the whole series, or at least all the series that I've read, considering I will admit I have not read all of them, so I can't be a complete expert on the ones I haven't read. And most of his goals do revolve around some kind of peacefulness and resolving in a good way for the people that he cares for. Like, as him being a Lord Rahl, he does take after his people, and he does have goals to look after them and care for them and make sure that nobody has to die for no reasons, those kind of things. So you could say that every single book that deals with that conflict, that deals with people directly, he has the goal of wanting everyone to be able to live in peace and to be happy and healthy and to save them from any troubles that they might be having. So again, it's kind of like a vague goal compared to some of the other characters that we've done, and I've had a little bit more concrete goals for them. But because of the way the story is written and the way that the books progress, instead of it being like a Dragonlance where there's 3 full books that follow one plot line, and instead it's its own little plots, and the goals change based on what's happening in each situation. So I can't really pinpoint anything other than wanting a peaceful life for his people and a peaceful life for himself to be able to live with Kaylin and to have a happy home with her and Zed. Okay, and then I want to talk a little bit about the character's growth and the character's changes. There's 15 books. So obviously, just as in any other book series or any other book as in one book period, characters experience things and characters change just like we humans do. So what kind of core traits or core parts of his being does change based on the different things that he goes through. This is something that I feel like I'm not sure about. Again, I've only read 6 of the books. But even through 6 books, a character will change in that time and will have experiences that will make them and evolve them into whatever is needed for either the next book or either for the next 3 books or whatever else. Throughout every single book, there is not necessarily change, but through multiple books, it is pretty much guaranteed that some things will have evolved the character, and that evolution will help the author be able to reach whatever they want them to do for the next however many books. But I will admit that I'm not somebody who can tell very well about Richard's change. I feel like he's always been kind and humble and smart and calculating, and even though at the beginning of his journey he didn't know much about himself at all and knew nothing about the Midlands and didn't know anything about being a seeker of truth. And of course I do think he's gotten stronger, mentally, and his his morals has gotten, you know, stronger based on the things he's gone through. But he's always had those same morals. They've just strengthened and become more solidified. I have a really hard time when I think about it, about the things that I feel like define Richard. Finding where he started and where he's at later, and seeing much of a difference other than things becoming more solidified, which technically things being more solidified is a change. But I kind of feel like a character has to evolve more than just becoming more of themselves, if that makes sense. I feel like there must be some differences that come into play, something that, you know, he didn't think about this way before, but now he does, that kind of stuff. I feel like a lot of times when you have so much tragedy, and so much hardship, you have to reevaluate things, and you find that some things are important, other things aren't important, or you come to realize that this is what you really want in your life, those kind of things. And I'm not really sure about the growth or the changes or the evolution of his character in that way. And so I was wondering if you guys could help me out. I'd really love to have a discussion about what you think is his changes throughout the books, and if you think that he does have those changes other than just becoming more of himself and more solidified in his values and views. Because I really do have a hard time with this character, seeing where the changes take place. Maybe it's just because I need to go back and reread them. Maybe it's not, I'm not sure. So I'd really love it if you would help me out in that area and have a bit more of a conversation with me and let me know what you think his changes are and who you think Richard is and how you think he got there. That would be really great if you could help me out in that sense. Okay, then the last thing I'd like to talk about, man, this class is going to be real short, which you're probably like, thank you, it doesn't have to be 50 minutes. But I'd really like to talk about the differences between the books and the TV show. The TV show is called, let's see, I think it's The Legend of the Secret. There we go, I had to think about it for a second. I watched all of it a couple of times. I really enjoyed it. It's actually the TV show that I ended up watching that led me to the books. And obviously the books, like most books, are better than the TV show. But it is nice when the TV shows do lead you to the books, because then you can enjoy them when you didn't know they existed in the first place. But I can definitely see some differences between the TV show and the book. Not only because the TV show did mix up a whole bunch of different events that happened in different books and they put them in the TV show like they were meant to be together, but also just Richard himself, I feel like is not quite captured in the TV show the same way that he is in the book. And so I'd like to go over those little bit of differences. Maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't, maybe you haven't seen the show. If you haven't seen the show, it is good, but at times it can be kind of cheesy and kind of B, but it's a good B. Kind of like, this makes a bad connection because Xena is like really B, even though it's really good. But it's not that B, but you kind of get a little bit of sometimes where you're just like, that's a little B, a little cheesy. But it ends up being good enough that you keep wanting to watch the next one. Let me know if anybody else knows anything about what I'm talking about in that regard. Anyway, let's move on. So the traits that I think are different between the book Richard and the TV show Richard is I don't think there's quite the same depth of character. He's really not as mature, in my opinion, as he is in the books. I feel like he's not saying that Richard obviously didn't at first, like I mentioned before, didn't know who he was at first. So that was a shock, but I just feel like he's much more impulsive in this TV show, and he's a lot more rash and impatient, and he's just not as mature and not as quite as richness in his character. Now maybe, since it has been a while since I read number one, maybe he was more that way in the first books and not as much in the second book, and that is a character change that happens. But I don't ever remember Richard being quite that reckless, quite that impulsive and quite that impatient. I really feel like in the TV series that he's very jumps headlong into anything and everything. Doesn't always quite have a plan on how to do the things he's doing. If somebody needs help, he just jumps in and doesn't even think to question anything. And not saying that Richard wouldn't help anybody, because obviously he does help people, but he would be cautious and think things through. He would say he's going to help them and then find out the situation, and would still be on guard for the situation as he moved forward. Anybody who has seen the TV series and read the books, go ahead and let me know if you think the same thing, or if you go ahead and watch the TV series because you didn't know there was one. Let me know what you think, if you have the same problems with his personality in the TV series and the same differences as I do. Now, his role in the story for the TV show, I do believe is also being the hero, which we've talked about before, and that is the same as in the books. But I do feel like his role as the sage character is less prominent. Even though he is the seeker of truth in the TV series, just like he is in the books, because he is more impatient, because he is more reckless, because he has less depth of character, in my opinion, in the TV show, I feel like the sage portion isn't as strong. I really feel like he does want to know the truth, and he can find out the truth when the storyline needs it to be. But on the little side adventures that he goes on, that's not the overarching plot. He really lacks in this sage portion. He's less calculating, he's less thinks things through. He just goes in, helps the person, and then finds out later, oh, the trap. Oh, we shouldn't have done that. Maybe part of that is because as a TV show, you do have to have the side arcs other than just the big arc in order for you to have an exciting TV series. But I just feel like he doesn't look for the truth as much in the TV show, and isn't quite as searching for the truth on the whole time as he is in the books. So I feel like his sage portion in the story is a lot less. So yeah, I think that's it for this character analysis. That went by pretty quick this time, didn't it? I think part of that is also because I didn't have as many goals I could do, since there's so many changing goals and things like that. But if there's anything that I really missed that you feel like, man, I wish you would talk about this, or man, I feel like this is an important part of his character as well, go ahead and leave a comment down below, or talk to me on my Twitter at fantasyfiction1, because I would really love to have a discussion with you, and if I missed anything, I would really, really like to have it pointed out so I can also think about that aspect and how that changes my opinion on things as well. If you haven't checked out the TV series and would like to, I know it's streaming free on ABC. I mean, you do have to watch ads on ABC unless you have I don't know if you have a cable provider, if that changes or not. But even if you don't have a cable provider that you link to your ABC account or anything like that, you can still watch it. They have all of them on there for free at this time. So go ahead and watch it there if you're interested. Let me know what you guys think of Richard Rahl and the Sword of Truth books. And is there anything else that I'm missing? I feel like even though it was pretty quick, I felt like I covered a lot of ground with Richard, despite, especially since they're such big books and there's so much to talk about, it's kind of hard to pinpoint the little details when there's so many details that make up him. So yeah, anything that you want to suggest, again, go ahead and leave it down below or on my Twitter. And the next class we're going to have is going to be finishing up our Dragons of Spring Dawning. So I guess I'll see you then. Bye!